Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yao Hill. I'm happy to present today on PBLL project design, define, and assess quality. I'm from University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm an assessment specialist here. I also have my PhD in second language studies, and I have taught Chinese and English before. So I'm also a language educator. So hopefully by the end of today or as a result of today's session, you will be able to access the rubric or the rubrics to reflect on your own PBLL project design. And very much so, I want everybody to think about ways to improve the current rubric that NFRC PBLL Summer Institute is going to be used again in the forthcoming Summer Institute. So to assess and define the quality of a PBLL, we think that an essential tool is to develop a set of clear criteria in the form of a rubric. We know that project-based language design already have established a rubric that is developed by the Buck Institute of Education. And they have these 8 criteria listed on the screen. However, these criteria are not so much geared towards language education, so we need to modify this rubric so that it's more aligned with the field of language education. Also, when we start to offering the PBLL Summer Institute, the Institute have specific outcomes for the participants to achieve. And those are to help participants to better facilitate language proficiency learning, to develop effective scaffolding strategies, use assessment strategies, and to facilitate the use of technology for students to successfully achieve their project. One of the leaders in organizing our Summer Institute is Cherise, and I think she is also in the audience. So she started working on the rubric that specifically address our institute outcomes. As you will see, I will show you later about these the rubric contents regarding to these 4 criteria. So the PowerPoint will be available after the session. I also send out the handouts. Those will be available. But if we just take a look at this rubric, which is already online, this is the rubric that Cherise started the effort in the development process. So these will be available to everybody. Also, this rubric is based on the Buck Institution's project design rubric. This will be available to you by the end of the presentation as well. So let me tell everybody a little bit about the evolution of these 2 sets of rubric. When the first PBLL Institute started in 2015, we actually asked all the participants to look at these sets of rubric and provide feedback. Because if their projects are going to be evaluated, we want all the participants to have a say in how they think their product should be evaluated. And that is actually one of the criteria in the assessment is the evaluation criteria should be co-constructed with our learners and students. And as you can see, these are our participants from the 2015 Summer Institute. The technology that I have used to assist in this code construction is Pad. This is also recommended by Cherise. So we ask folks to come up with, for the Buck Institute rubric, they only have 3 categories. We want them to come up with the 4th category. And one of the input is, for example, there's people will work in groups, and for the category of public product presentation, this is how people come up with the fourth category, which is the exemplary category. Okay, so the major modifications as a result of the co-construction process of the rubrics, we changed the original categories of the Bach institution's project design rubric into our current categories, and they are emerging, developing, proficient, and exemplary. And we actually think that the new categories promote our teachers the sense of that we're professional, that will continue to improve, continue to develop, rather than something that lacks or needs improvement. So we want the language to reflect that project-based language learning, the project you design can be continuously improved, that we can constantly reflect and compare our project design against the criteria that have been deliberated upon by the leaders in the field to build that confidence over time and mastery over time. Okay, so for the rest of the session, I'm going to briefly introduce these criteria and give you examples from one of our exemplary, or we consider exemplary project that has been in our repository. So the first criteria is key knowledge and success skills. When we're teaching students, very often that we forgot that it is the 21st century success skills that is more long-lasting and it's more important for students to carry on in their further studies or in their life, for they perform as a responsible and productive social global citizen. So we want the project to focus on cultivating students' ability in the 21st century skills. For example, critical thinking, be able to synthesize, critically evaluate evidence, synthesize multiple perspectives, things like that. We want them to be able to collaborate and to effectively communicate with their team members, with the communities, with the world, and to be able to use technologies to convey their intent and their productivity to the world. And 21st century skills probably are more familiar to the, I would say, K-12 public education. For the people in higher education, you're probably more familiar with your accreditation requirements. For the University of Hawaii at Manoa, we are accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and they have 5 core competencies. As you can see, some of these are also in what we call 21st century skills. So these skills are more important for us to foster, not only probably in our own course, probably we can communicate with our colleagues to see how can we extend our project so that students can develop their skills in multiple courses, in a sequence of courses, but that is probably beyond today's presentation. So for the key knowledge and success skills, we have 4 levels, but in this presentation, I'm only going to talk about 2 levels, and that is a proficient and exemplary. Those are the highest 2 levels, and the 2015 PBL participants think that proficient is probably where we want our products in the end to end up. At least that's the benchmark, that's the baseline. We want all our project design to end up there. So in terms of key knowledge and success skills, if it's proficient, then it should address specific and important knowledge and skills. So not just the language functions, but it's also the critical thinking piece, the collaboration piece, problem solving, and so on and so forth. And when it's exemplary, then we want these skills to be aligned with our institutional learning objectives, with our institution's mission and value, and also with the community. And the second criteria is challenging problem or question. If the project is reached the proficiency level, your challenging problem would be open-ended and intrigues students' curiosity, so they're motivated. And they're also aligned with the outcomes. If you want students to develop collaborative skills, you would want your project to have a piece where students work in groups. And it's appropriate for students' ability and needs. So it's not totally out of their cognitive and linguistic ability. And also it's infused in culture. So infused in culture is what we make our rubric more geared towards the field of language education. Okay, in terms of the exemplary category, not only we want it to be open-ended, we want it to be compelling and provoke students' self-motivated inquiry. Of course, it has to be clearly aligned with the outcome, and then students have the opportunity to have that in-depth interaction with the cultural or multidisciplinary materials. So I am going to show you an example, and this example is, I believe, was presented yesterday by Nicole, and she has this project called Go Power. The purpose of, or the challenging problem of this project is that how can we as students in California engage those in our local community and global network to support the ongoing education of girls in our Peace Corps match village in Africa. So we're asking students to bring the reality and the knowledge about education of children in Africa to their local community in California and to the global audience. So this question is open-ended because there's no one way to explore the ways to do so. It is motivating because if everybody is engaged, if we raise the community awareness of this issue, maybe there will be more people willing to put their effort, if they have time or if they have money or if they have skills, they can contribute to this effort. And then throughout reading through the issues related to children's education, especially girls' education in Africa, it engaged students' critical thinking ability because they are also interact with the people in the Peace Corps that are working in Africa. So it builds that intercultural competency because they have to communicate with the people in the local community in Africa. And they have to translate or transform their knowledge to the outside audience that builds their capacity to communicate. And with that, we hope that they can engage in increase in linguistic proficiency. And because students are encounter a lot of authentic materials, so this question itself also helps the students to be infused in the cultural materials and the cultural context interaction as well. So that is about the challenging problem. The next criteria is called sustained inquiry. When it's at the proficient level, the inquiry process is reinforced throughout the project and engage students' higher order thinking skills. And also, the second element of this is that students take the responsibility of generating inquiry questions. So it's not just one time, okay, we gave them several articles, asked them to synthesize. It's actually throughout the project that the inquiry process is reinforced. So maybe now the first they are asked to synthesize something, and then later they ask to be synthesized another issue that is more, it's further, it's deeper, or it's more dimension, it's engaged in multiple perspectives, okay? And if it's exemplary, then the inquiry should be sustained over time and with academic rigor. So first, they understand the issue, they do the synthesis. And then probably later, they have to apply their understanding in solving the real world problems. So from the understanding to application, there is scaffolded and sustained in a deeper level inquiry that is going on. And these questions hopefully is driven by students throughout the project. So students will begin to feel the need that I need to do this. Now I understand and I have the power to give it to the community. So they can then learn, how do I give it to the community? What are the best communication strategies that I can use? So these are the questions that students can generate throughout the project. So just as I said earlier, using the Go Power project, so many of you may not attend yesterday's presentation, so that's why I'm giving a little bit of brief introduction. So students actually decide what are the contents that they want to put in their final product. Their final product is that they're going to organize a local community forum where they empower the community with the knowledge of how to help education of the children in the Africa. And then they, not only that, they also have to manage their timelines, their deliveries, their delivery methods, technologies, and so on and so forth. So I think this project in this regard would be exemplary. Another criteria is authenticity. We think that the project sometimes, because you have the constraint of one course, one semester limit, and sometimes maybe it's not quite possible for you to engage in this very profound or in-depth engagement with the real world. However, you can reach the proficient level by realistically simulate the real-world situation. And if you have products beyond the classroom, like we have projects where in the International Cultural Festival on our campus, we have the faculty who ask their students to perform authentic cultural practices like dance, art form, or their practice food, and so on and so forth. So that is a product beyond the classroom. So we think if you can do that, maybe you can reach the proficient level. In terms of exemplary, then we really want the students to engage in the cross-cultural interaction, and the products fulfill the real-world needs. Using this Go Power project as example, so not only the students have to correspond with members of the village in Togo, they also have to again, as I said, present the information and their knowledge to the local community forum, and online exhibit, online presentation to public, to the world. So they're truly interacting not only with the cultural community, they are also communicating with their local community in California, and they further communicate their message to the world. So that is truly exemplary in the sense of authenticity. Then the next category is student voice and choice. The proficient level is students have opportunities to express voice and choice in certain aspects of certain maybe important aspects, for example, the topics or the format of their presentation. And the second element is that students have significant responsibility with teachers' guidance. So in this part, the students' voice and choice expressed in the content and format, but also in their self-independent learning capacity. So it has two dimensions. In terms of exemplary level, we want the student voice and choice to be evident in every phase of the project, from the initiation to the end of the delivery to the management of the project, probably every phase of the project. Then students take main responsibility with the teacher as a resource. So for example, in this example project, it is a student-run management. So basically, after the instructors gave them the resources and source materials to understand the basic issues related to why children should have education, what education can do, what are the impact of education for the children, and what are the current status and what are the possible solutions. Then students digest this information, but then they decide how they want to convey that information in the local forum. They decide on the timeline task division among themselves. This is group work. They decide on the technology to deliver that. So I think, and also in particular, this project is commendable is that among many projects, I think this is one of the few I see that is specific and explicit about the student-run management process. However, depending on your student's cognitive capacity, sometimes you may want to give students more guidance just because if the students are not cognitively quite there, you want to give them more scaffolding so students not overwhelmed both by the linguistic requirements and the content and manage the project. Yeah, okay. So the next criteria is about reflection. Research has shown that reflective learning, learning at a meta-cognitive capacity where students reflect how they learn, how to better learn, what they learn helps them to learn better. So at the proficient level, we hope the project would allow students to have the in-depth reflection, at least at the end. And some reflection also during the process where students are doing the project. And then students not only reflect on the learning itself, but also reflect on the process. And this is also where the instructors, educators ourselves can get some sense of how we can revise the project design and management. And if it's at the exemplary level, then the project should allow the learners to have in-depth reflection not only at the end, but also during, because as students start to reflect, they may be more intentional, they be more, sometimes students like me, sometimes I got carried away with, putting all the pictures on my PowerPoint, but I have to bring myself back to think about what do I want my participants to gain at the end of this session so that I don't make it too flashy and make it focused. Okay, so students have to do that. So during the process, if you give them more time to reflect, maybe in the end, they're more intentional towards the learning outcomes. In terms of the project of the example, the project allows students to do self-assessment. When the students do self-assessment against a set of very clear criteria, they also reflect on their experience and reflection at the end. So this one is at least a proficient level. Okay, now the next is, as you can see, some of the criteria are similar and they are related. And that's something that we will discuss also at the end of how to improve our rubric. So next criteria is critique and revision. At the proficient level, we want our learners to have multiple opportunities for feedback from multiple perspectives, themselves, their peers, teachers, and very, very valuable is the target audience. So if they spend the whole semester to prepare something for the community, I bet they would love some feedback from the community about how they did. So that's very valuable for them, for our learners. However, sometimes, the feedback at the professional level, even though we give them opportunity for feedback, the feedback may not always be structured, and they may be loosely connected. But we do want to see that students' improvement on their work based on the feedback. So if your projects allow this to happen, then you're at least at a proficient level. At the exemplary level, then we would want to structure the feedback with clear evaluation criteria. And usually this manifested in a rubric. And also, not only students get from the feedback from peers and teachers, also from the target audience. And also, this criteria come from our participants. Outcomes of critique and improvement is evident in the final product. So students may write acknowledgement a section of, people that the improvements they made or in the reflection paper. So if they produce a student book, let's say, then they have the acknowledgement in the beginning or the end of the book, something like that. And we can clearly see the revision and the polished product as a result of the student's iterative work on it. Okay, so, and I really think that this project, the example project, Go Power, is truly exemplary in this regard. Because students, you can see, have 3 rounds of review. The first is student self-assessment, and then students give their product to the peer, get feedback, review, and then give to the teacher and get feedback and review and revise. Also, at the last point, they also do another cycle of self-assessment. In the end, when they present to the community who speak French would also give them grade on their French ability. So multiple cycles of review and assessment, formative assessment is built in the process of the project. The last criteria on the that resembles the Bach Institute's rubric is public presentation. What they call is public product. But when I read the rubric, I really think it means public presentation. So I change it to public presentation of the product. At a proficient level, we want the products to be offered to people beyond the classroom. As I said, they can be the local community, or they can be, sometimes could be just people from outside of your class, maybe students from another class. And it also allows students the opportunity to publicly explain the reasoning behind the design choices, inquiry, and learning processes. As you know, whenever we bought a DVD of a movie, there's one disc for the movie, there's another disc for the commentary. So we hope that students would be able to perform something like a commentary of, the reasoning, the inquiry process, what they have learned, something like that. So that when we read the commentary, I don't know you have experience reading the commentary. Actually, I love to see the commentary because it gives me more appreciation of the work that went into a movie or a project. At the exemplary level, we want students to be to present to the target audience. If they come up with a student storybook, we hope that they present to the actual children in that cultural community. If they produce a letter to the Congress or to the newspaper editor, we hope that they have the opportunity to do so. And then we hope that students have multiple opportunities to interact with our target audience, and hopefully this is built in with our review reflection process where students can get feedback and continue use this opportunity to look at their own product and revise. Students have opportunity to explain reasoning and inquiry and learning processes. So in our example product, as I said, they are not only doing a local community forum in California, they're also doing an online presentation to the world. Okay, so this is the second part. Now I'm moving on to the second part, or right now, the second set of the rubric that is very much particularly aligned or related to language learning. So, and when we talk about language learning, of course, the first and foremost, it's very important is that throughout the project process, we want students to build language proficiency. And if we're teaching foreign languages, we would want to look at the world readiness standards for learning languages, and they have 5 standards. We often call them 5 C's. In terms of the communication, as you can see on the top, there's 3 modes: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. So we hope to build students' competence and their capacity towards more meaningful communication capabilities in the real world. That's our intent. So in terms of language proficiency, then first at a proficient level, we want your project to have a clear and measurable student learning outcomes in terms of the meaningful communicative functions. When we say it's meaningful communicative functions, it's when we say it's not just formulaic, but it's where students can use the language in the real world, even though it can be sentence structure can be simple, but we want it to represent the authentic usage of the real world, and at least in two modes. So they can do it as an interpersonal mode where they talk with their peers, they engage individuals, or they can be either interpretive. Interpretive is like a listening or reading, so I think that's probably everybody will engage in that. But it's interpersonal interaction. Do you have that component, or do you have the presentational component where students demonstrate, they present to the community, to the world, or to the classmates? If it's exemplary, we want the outcomes to be significant and meaningful communicative functions across all three modes and address all 5 Cs. So right now, this is where we phrased our language proficiency standard, and we would love feedback on our wordings once you have seen our rubric, especially the piece that touch upon culture, because I think the culture element is actually infused in all of the standard. But somehow, if we can make our rubric language more evident about promoting the cultural competencies, we would welcome your comments and input on that. In terms of scaffolding, this is currently how the rubrics are phrased, or the essential points of the rubric. So if it's proficient level, we hope that the project has step-by-step instructions so students don't get lost, and the task is modeled so students have something to follow, have an example to follow. But then the instructions may heavily rely on paragraphs or oral written instructions, and it provides some support. At the exemplary level, then we hope the instructions are clear and can be followed, so there's no more than 5 steps. And not only we give students the models, we also give them examples, and we can give them there should be scaffolding throughout the whole process in terms of the linguistic capacity, in terms of the cognitive capacity, in terms of the project management piece. So every piece in terms of technology. So every piece should be scaffolded, and is where we can see the exemplary. Okay, so I see a question there. I think Adam is asking about giving concrete examples. I missed the second part of your question, but I think Cherise has done a very good presentation on scaffolding strategies, if this is referred to scaffolding, and her presentation is available. I think NFRC can send that out. Okay, so let me give an example on this one, on the Go Power project example. So in the beginning, the instructors give students materials. As you can see, these materials are actually provide that cognitive scaffolding. So first, let's understand the rights of children. And then let's understand what are the problems. And then let's understand how can we solve this problem. So in terms of the cognitive process, this is scaffolded. Okay, and then students also have multiple opportunities for feedback. In terms of technology, I don't know how it's scaffolded. So then, I would say maybe this project, at least from my reading in the repository, is reaching the proficient level. Okay, assessment. I love assessment, and therefore there's so many bullet points under assessment. But assessment, as you can see, as I start explaining things, they're actually very similar to some of the things that I talked earlier. So first of all, at proficient level, all student learning outcomes should be measurable. But then at exemplary level, they're also significant. Then in the end, when we talk about assessment, we often use the term summative assessment and formative assessment. A summative assessment, we hope to see that in the end, students produce something that is culminating, that can comprehensively show that their ability, both linguistic ability and success skills, that is encompassed in this final product. Then we should definitely allow the formative, iterative improvement process through formative assessment. So formative assessment, as you can see, is related to critique and revision and reflection and, the things that we talked earlier. The evaluation are aligned with SLOs, clear and shared. So these are the proficient level. And then at the exemplary level, the same thing. Then the evaluation criteria to be co-constructed. And that is why we invite the participants here and open to the whole community of language educators on your comments and input of this rubric that we're going to share. So using this example, the Go Power project has embedded formative assessment process, which leads to in the end, student product, which is their forum presentation and their online presentation. And each of the steps is being evaluated with clear rubric criteria. And in the end, community grade their French linguistic ability. Okay, so moving on to the last criteria of all, that is the technology. We do believe that technology have a significant place or role to play in students' capacity because technology literacy is one of the success skills. At the proficient level, we encourage our learners to participate, using technology to participate or collaborate. So they can use like Google Docs, so they can use some online discussion forums to evaluate synthesized information, participate in brainstorming with their peers or with their target audience. But at the exemplary level, we want students to engage and utilize technology for production and use so within the legal and ethical standard, and they provide useful service to the community. So, for example, in this project, students are using online multimedia resources, either videos or pictures, to engage in understanding of the issue. They explore different devices. I think this is equipment, computer devices, to see which way is better to present. And then they use blogs to share. They use desktop publishing to prepare their products. They use Skype to collaborate and present to their target audience, and so on. Okay, so that are all the criteria. And if we do a quick summary, this is what I have covered. In the PBLL project element design, this is, again, we borrowed it from the BUCK project design rubric. It has 8 elements: knowledge, challenging problems, sustained inquiry, authenticity, student voice and choice, reflection, critique and revision, public presentation. And then we have language-specific criteria: language proficiency, scaffolding, assessment, technology, and success skill. However, we do think that further work can be done to improve this set of criteria. For example, the key knowledge and success skills and language proficiency, they're all talking about what we want students to be able to know, to do, to value by the end of the course or the project. So maybe somehow those can be combined, right? And then when we talk about formative assessment and scaffolding and reflection and critique and revision, we keep mentioning the same examples. Oh, you know, students do self-assessment, peer assessment, they receive feedback, they revise. So somehow, using the examples that I just gave, we can see those four criteria are somehow related to each other. They're very much related to each other, but then should we combine them or should we leave them alone to focus the importance of each of the elements? And then again, there's authenticity and public presentation, because really it's about the task is real world task. We're communicating to the real world audience. So, you know, they share these common elements, so can we do something about it so that we don't have 12 categories. I think 12 categories is a lot. So there's some future work can be done here. Another important work, as I said earlier, is that cultural competency and interculturality is very important in language learning. And that be able to be intercultural competent also encompass the success skills, like being able to understand and present multiple perspectives, withhold one's assumption, be open to alternative worldviews. So it's very encompassing, but it's an important competency that we want students to gain through language education. So can we somehow make it more dominant? And then another thing is that, as you can see, after we share the rubric with you, as you can see, even though the project element design piece is pretty much still, you know, take the form of the original rubric language. So can we make the language education, the language teaching and the learning part more in the rubric? So this is where we'll invite your input on making this happen. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, and I'd love to hear your comments, and if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Yao. Stephen here. A lot of the questions, there's some ongoing commentary in the chat, and it seems like questions center around seeing specific examples. So those questions I'm going to defer, because in the interest of time, we need to get started with our last presentation. And so I'll thank you very much for your presentation.